Welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special guest, Educator Ife Damon. Thank you, Ife, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jerome.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you. So I like to start with a quick game. This game is called Pass or Fail. So I give you two options, and whichever one passes or whichever one you prefer over the other, you tell me that one. That's the one that passes. All right?
Okay.
So pass or fail, reading or writing?
Um, Let me ask you, is this for me? Would
For
I
you,
pass or
for
failed
you,
in or just?
what do you prefer to do, reading or
Okay,
writing?
I prefer writing.
Okay.
Yes.
Math or science?
Science.
Hmm. Recess, going out to recess or staying in the lunchroom?
Recess.
Recess. Okay. Art or PE?
Art.
Last one. Being a teacher or being an administrator?
And a teacher, I'll say.
Teacher. Okay. Nice. Nice. Can you explain that one? Why teacher over administrator?
Well, I was going to say administrator because you're still a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but I picked teacher just because I'm close to the students. But honestly, I should have probably said administrator because you can still teach the teachers and you can
Mm-hmm.
still connect with students.
Okay. So which one would you go with now after thinking about it? Teacher, administrator?
Administrator,
Administrator?
I'll say
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I should have went with
Fair.
my first line. That's what we always tell students when they take.
Yep. Yep. So first let's get started. So the first question I'll ask you is um when did you know you wanted to be an educator and why?
It's funny because I'm an alternative educator. So I was
Mm,
initially an accountant, but accounting is really boring. And in 2004, I just started like getting these feelings like I wanted to do something more meaningful. I wanted to be more engaging. And then this opportunity for an alternative teaching program in Atlanta called A Plus. I heard it on the radio. It was like a month before the deadline. Everything just lined up
mm,
and it just felt right. And at the time, I was having all of these ideas about how I could change education. And it was
mm,
weird because even though I've always loved education for myself, I never thought that I would be an educator. Like if someone told me in high school, Ife, you're going to be a teacher, and I would have
mm.
said, yeah, right. Y'all get on my nerves. There's a way that I'm going to deal with it, but it was a calling. It truly
That's
was.
that's great. That's a great point you made there. So I think you kind of gave one of the reasons why we don't see as many Black and brown educators in the field, right? You said, y'all already get on my nerves, right? And I think part of the difficult, challenging experience that some of us have in the school system itself, a lot of Black and brown students, pushes us away from becoming teachers because like we don't want to, get in the field that kind of in some ways traumatized us or we didn't have the most best experience with. And I think that, I think it has to be reversed in some ways in order to really support the students who, look like us and come from similar places and backgrounds.
I definitely agree. And I think one of the ways that we can try to reverse that is to encourage students to be change agents.
Mm,
So it's like, okay, school sucked for you. Come join this, industry and change it,
mm,
make it not suck for future generations. And so that's like my mantra. That's my goal. And I actually do when I was in the classroom,
mhm.
cultivated, students to be change agents and not to just think everything has to stay the way it currently is.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And for educators, Black and brown educators who go back into the school system to be educators and teach, I think it's important to always remember your experience that you've had as a student and keep that in the forefront of your mind so you can be a change agent and you can put yourself in the student's shoes and make sure that you don't forget those experiences and try to make those more positive experiences for those students, for all students. You know? Um, my next question is, teaching is a very difficult job. I want to start with the positive. So what has been your best or funniest or most memorable moment as an educator and why?
Well, I would say most memorable moment was one of my most recent moments. I was just recently, actually, unfortunately, fired because I'm not vaccinated,
Oh,
and
sorry to hear that.
so I told my students, just a few days before I left, that I would no longer be their teacher,
Mm,
and This was only a few weeks into the school year.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to, I'm the type of teacher that walks around and I'm in every student's,
Mm-hmm.
and so when I got to this particular student, he had like his eyes were welling up, and he said, Miss, I've never, and this is a young Black boy. He said, Miss, I've never even had a Black teacher. You're my favorite teacher. I've never even had one, and now you're leaving, and it just broke my heart, because unfortunately, that's not the first time that a student, I've been the first Black teacher for a student, or the first just teacher of color, just at all. And this is New York City, which is diverse people-wise, but not uh, educator-wise. And so it still breaks my heart to, think about it, and all of those students who I couldn't be there for, to continue to be a role model for. So
Yeah, that's disheartening, and it's also connects back to what we said before about Black and brown teachers and how there's already a shortage. And I'm interested to see how many ended up losing their job as teachers because of the vaccine, because we already know a lot of Black and brown people don't feel comfortable taking the vaccine.
exactly.
So now when we put those mandates in, they're only going to bring the number of Black and brown teachers even lower, which creates even more difficulty with getting teachers like that to enter the field and now even stay if they're not vaccinated. So it's unfortunate. Sorry to hear that. How about the I would say the most difficult part, like the biggest challenge? It's probably the same one, right?
Well, it definitely could be, but I'm thinking about one challenge I had in particular that I had to that I overcame, that kind of let me know, like, I do, I know what I'm doing. This was when I was teaching in middle school, and it was an 8th grade social studies class, and I'm special education certified. So I often have taught alongside a content specialist teacher. And so this is the social studies teacher, and he had been with the students since 6th grade. So they had their entire, middle school career. And they were very comfortable with him, and they loved him, and they were just throwing me like all kinds of shade. They were not feeling Miss Damon. And I was like, this is not gonna work. Like, kids love me. Like, they don't know, like, you're supposed to love me. So I talked to the teacher and I said, on Monday, I'm going to take every single student out one by one into the hallway so I can build a relationship. Like, you've been building a relationship with them over 3 years. And so they're just they cling to you naturally, but I haven't, they're not allowing me to build a relationship, so I'm gonna have to take them out. And so I took every single 32 of those students out into the hallway one by one, and literally built that relationship. And that Tuesday, it was a different world. It was a different world. And so that was, I just, to me, it just confirmed what I've always known, and always the creed that I live by, relationships are everything in education. When I first started, my supervisor, he told me, a child doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's always been my mantra. Like, that stuck with me to this day.
I love that. A child doesn't care what you know until they know how much you care. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think, at first they was like, who's this new woman you bring into the house? I don't like her. And then once you broke down your guard and you built that relationship with them and you got to know them and showed them how much you cared, they treated you like family, So I think that's real. That's really real.
Yeah,
definitely. Going into something that you kind of touched on before, right? If you had a chance to think about one change you would make to the education system, what was that one thing that you would start with in order to make it a better system for all?
For me, it would be implementing community-based learning, just point blank, because I'm an advocate. Well, first of all, let me just say what community-based learning is. It's, to me, how I define it, as students using standards as skills and tools to learn about and improve their community. So we can still, and this is something for me, I had to learn, like, okay, how do I still make sure that the kids demonstrate proficiency in the standards, but how do I engage them? And so for me, it was all about relevance. And so community-based learning is all about relevance, because it's about what's going on in their community. And the community could be their school community, it could be their neighborhood, it could be just the city, It could be the nation or even our global community, because the reality is our children are global. You know, they're part of a global, we all are a part of it, but like this is what they've grown up being a part of a global society. And so utilizing the standards. So for example, when I was an English teacher, because I taught all subjects, but when I taught English, most recently virtually, I had students when they had to learn how to write rhetorical essays, you know, persuasive essays. So instead of just having them write a persuasive essay just about something that's random and only I'm going to see, I had them identify an issue that they would like to see change in the world. And then I taught them, you know, the strategies and the process of writing a rhetorical essay. But then they had to actually find the individuals who can actually make a change. So for example, they use websites like change.org or Color Change. And they found a petition, but they didn't just, you know, select the petition that's already there. They actually used their persuasive essays and send those to the president or to the, you know, whatever politicians or whoever it was that, whatever issue was that they wanted to see change. So for some students, it was about police brutality. Other students, it was about plastic reduction. Other students, it was about, you know, just other types of pollution awareness, LGBTQ rights. So that's just one example of community-based learning. And why I love it so much is that it can be student-centered. If you really take time to figure out what are the real skills that students need to demonstrate, because a lot of times, and this is something I learned just teaching in the English department, and this is how we grew up too. Well, I can't speak for you, but you know, teachers, when I talk to teachers and I say, you know, what are you teaching? They say, well, I'm teaching this book. And a book is not any of the standards at all. There's no standards that says teach Shakespeare. And our kids hate it. You know, most of the kids hate Shakespeare. First of all, it's another dialect, not our dialect of English. And so it's already a barrier right there. And then, you know, anyway, I can go on and on and on about the traditional paradigm, but I really hope that we continue to move towards community-based learning, because not only are students learning in engaging ways and in relevant ways, but they're also helping their communities. They're also taking action and they're becoming change agents at an early age. We don't have to wait for children to become adults to actually make this world a better place. This is untapped resource that we need to start utilizing more. And I think that they have the fresh ideas that can actually take us to the next level.
I love that. I love that community-based learning, making it realistic for them and making it something that they identify with, something that they're passionate with. And I think that could be and is oftentimes so much more motivating for students, because it's something that affects them and their environment, their family, their community. And when they see the change that they can make, they see how powerful it is. So it's empowering as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. All right. Last segment, last question I want to say. I want you to think about a teacher in your history, in your experience as a student. What is one teacher you will give a shout out to and why? Who would you give a shout out to and why as a teacher?
Oh, see, this is tough for me because I really honestly want to say my first teacher is my mom. And so I wanted to give a shout out to her. She's transitioned, so, you know, I say to the ancestors, but she was my dad. I grew up in a very traditional home. And so my dad worked and he wanted, you know, my mom and him were on the same page about her, you know, her staying home until we all went to school. And so she was home the whole time. And even when we went to school, she volunteered at our library. So she was still very much a part of our educational system. And so she taught us, you know, we were very well prepared before we even stepped into a school building. And so I definitely want to shout her out. But if I could shout out,
I'll give you one more.
From the building. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It would be my middle school math teacher. He's my teacher for 7th and 8th grade, Mr. Lovett at Philip Livingston Middle School in Albany, New York. Nice. He made learning fun and he made it relevant. He would just use things that would make you connect. So like, even if it was like LCD, lowest common denominator, we had a security guard, not security guard, but like, you know, just a hall monitor.
Oh, hall monitor.
His name was Mr. D. Yeah, hall, and so yes, safety agent is the name. But yeah, as a hall monitor back then. This was in the 80s. And so he his name was Mr. D. And so our teacher he would be like, oh, this is Mr. D's wife, LCD, you know, and still this is like 30 plus years ago, and I still remember LCD wife because of, you know, and so anytime we would, you know, he'd be like, you forgot Mr. D's wife, what's the lowest common denominator, you know. So but he just always made it fun. He always had students involved. We had to go to the board and actually do show our homework on the board, like just a lot of things. The do now he used to always say that, like, it's time for the do now like and, you know, the do now is still a thing, you know, 30 years later. But so, a lot of things that he did that made education fun and interesting, that and he made me love math. So had you you know asked me what was my favorite subject maybe 10 years ago, I would definitely said math. I was the type that wanted to make my own math problems and you know test them out on other people. Like and so he made me, yeah, I mean, I've always loved education anyway, just schooling. I always loved school, but he's always been my favorite.
What's his name again?
Mr. Lovett.
Mr. Lovett. Shout out to Mr. Lovett. It seems like he brought a lot of personality into his teaching, but a lot of like real world experience. And then he did a great job of selling it, right? That's part of education, is really your energy you bring and how much you let the students know how much this means to you. When sometimes students see how passionate you are about what you teach, then they automatically build on that passion or have that passion because it's contagious, you know? So I think that's great advice for all teachers to take. Yes. Thank you, Ife, for coming on the show. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your experience and your insight, and keep doing what you're doing, because I think you bring so much to the field of education. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, and thank you for shining light on us educators. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you guys for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything.